Hello everybody and welcome to the Event Tech Live Summit 2022. My name is James Dixon and I shall be your host for this day of content and conversation relating to all things event tech. It's great to be back here behind the camera following on of the success of some of our previous Event Tech Live virtual events. Today is specifically our first Event Tech Live Summit. Our first session is with Mr. Luke Bilton. Luke is the Chief Growth Officer at ExpoPlatform. Will be joining us in just a couple of minutes' time. But whilst we wait to bring Luke on the line to deliver that first session of the day, just a look around the event platform. For those of you who may not have used the Hubilo platform before, they are, of course, our headline sponsor of the Event Tech Live Summit 2022, and a little mention to the support and the great conversations and build up that we've had to this event with all of the team at Hubilo and all of their input and support that they've given us to get this particular event up and running today. You'll notice that the sessions are scheduled on the sessions tab at the top of your Hubilo screen. We're running an all-day live session, so you can basically watch all of the sessions today on a continuous stream. That's labeled up as live stream in your Hubilo event platform. And each of the individual sessions are also accessible via an individual session link. The Q&A and chat functions are available in both of those. But if you do want to watch the entirety of the content today, then the live stream is what you need to go to, and you'll be able to watch continuously during the day. And we'll also be showing some extra content on that live stream. We'll be taking a little look back at previous Event Tech Lives and also looking at some of the sponsors that are making this event happen today. So do take a good look around the Hubilo event platform and engage with the sponsors and all of the other content that is on there today. So we move on to our first live session. And I'm delighted to say that joining us on the line any moment now is Mr. Luke Bilton. Luke is the Chief Growth Officer for ExpoPlatform, a name and a brand that I'm sure many, if not most, and all of our audience today are familiar with. Luke, welcome to the Event Tech Live Summit. It's good to see you.
Very good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. No, it's great to see you. You have the honor of kicking off our first session at the Event Tech Live Summit. Just a reminder to everybody tuning in that if you are watching Luke's session, you can put questions to him using the Q&A function right next to the window that you're watching the video stream in. And I'm going to join Luke a little bit later on in his session to post some of those questions to him that you may want to submit. But for now, I'm delighted to hand over to Luke into your session. Luke, I'll see you in about 25 minutes time, hopefully with some questions from our audience.
Fantastic. And thank you everyone for joining us. As a slight change to what was planned, I said it was going to be 10 insights from the Future of Events Blueprint series, but actually we're going to talk about 25, and I'm going to try and do it really fast as a bit of a data blast, because there's an awful lot to cover, and I'm excited to do it. So over the last 14 months or so at ExpoPlatform, we've been publishing 5 different ebooks, which have each gone into depth into the different areas of digital transformation around the events industry. So that's over 250 pages, over 40 contributors have taken part of that. And there's been an awful lot of content, which I've boiled down to share with you fast. As background, what we do at ExpoPlatform is we create smart events and 365 communities for some of the world's largest event organizers. A lot of what we do is for associations, conferences, and trade shows. And a lot of the content I'm going to share with you is probably geared more towards the larger scale event side of the equation. So larger scale conferences and exhibitions, but hopefully relevant to everyone. I'm going to show you now some of the contributors who took part in this this really large project. As I say, overall there were 40 different contributors. We did deep dives into marketplaces, the hybrid business model, monetization, AI and data science, and into communities as well. So what I'm going to pick from this is 25 of what I feel to be some of the most important insights. And if you want to download all 5 ebooks, you can just go to expoplatform.com/ebooks. I'll share the link in the chat as well as we go. And it's been a fascinating time to be covering the developments in this space. I mean, as Adam was saying, it's been a period of unprecedented change. I don't think there's any more interesting industries right now than the intersection of technology and events. So the last 20 years or so, I've been working event organizer side. So I worked previously running digital and event projects at Informa, UBM, Future, places like that. Now I'm on the technology side, and as I say, so it couldn't be, I don't think, a more exciting time right now than this sort of fast-changing period that we're living through. So what we've been living through is essentially 10 years of digital acceleration in just 3 months. That was the start of the pandemic. There's various different surveys and research projects around this, but generally across the globe, e-commerce adoption in the general public accelerated by about a decade in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And there's all sorts of different data points around it, but this is one that I think is one of the ones that sort of like sets off so clearly what's been changing in the world at large. And it's not just familiarity with web-based communications, video sharing. It's also some really fundamental things around buying and selling, which for those who are in that sort of exhibition space is really important. This is an ongoing study by McKinsey of about 3,500 buyers, and you can see here how the comfort that buyers have with going completely digital and having an omni-channel mix of touch points has really grown rapidly throughout the pandemic. And this is every country across the globe that was surveyed is at part of this. Now, different countries are at different phases, but generally what we're seeing is that omni-channel is absolutely essential in B2B buying and selling in a way that it really wasn't pre-pandemic. So it's been very, very fast, the transformation, and we as an industry need to keep up with some of these trends. What we're seeing is that in 2021, 2022, event professionals are starting to apply the lessons that they got from working purely virtual to in-person events. And so, there's been pros and cons with working in a virtual way. Some of the real strengths, I think, have been around audience growth and the ability to communicate through content on virtual platforms. So the growth in content, the reach, and the growth in audience has been huge. One of the people we interviewed as part of our ebooks was Anna Knight from Informa Market. She runs Brand Licensing Expo, and their virtual event had 70% net new attendees came to their festival of licensing virtual event. That's just one of them, but I think it's a really good example of how through the pandemic, organisers have been able to attract completely new and more diverse audiences by going through virtual channels. And most people who you speak to don't want that to stop, and they still want to be able to have that digital wrapper in some way around their events. On the downside, what has often struggled is exhibitor ROI. In fact, some of the post-event surveys which Explory have been tracking were showing that NPS could be as low as minus 40, minus 48 in some cases in 2020. And so a lot of the strategies which people are putting together are around how can we apply some of the best things about virtual with some of the best things about in-person events. And ROI we'll come on to later, but that's a really, really important topic. And then one of the other things which, one of the great positives, if you like, of the pandemic has been the impact on carbon neutrality, on sustainability. Now, it's an uncomfortable fact, but virtual events generate just 1% of the CO2 emissions of a physical event, according to a very interesting study. And And so even if that isn't necessarily the business model that is going to work, the fact that you can become 99% more sustainable through virtual events is something which I don't think organizers can ignore. But then an interesting finding alongside that was actually 90% of that carbon impact came from the air travel of the 10% who traveled the furthest. So the biggest issue with particularly large-scale international events is the air travel. And if there are strategies you could put in place to minimize people having to travel from a long distance, then it's definitely worth looking at. Sustainability is going to stay very high on the agenda as the pandemic recedes. And then for event organisers who've been kept on the hop, I mean, as much there's been as much as a sort of like 70% revenue dip in 2020 for our industry, which is huge. And so this is one of the reasons why organisers are trying to diversify their revenue mix. And the digital revenue shift, according to AMR Globex research, which is a comprehensive interview of the top trade show organisers, is showing that digital is forecast to be only 2% pre-pandemic, which is incredibly low, very reliant on in-person events. Most organisers are trying to diversify their revenue mix to go to digital being 25%. And so that's a very significant shift, and it's one that's causing lots of structural changes and lots of pressure on teams to figure out how they can monetize both sides of their audience in new and different ways. But it's a really exciting time, as I say. So one of the people we interviewed and a member of our advisory board, Paul Miller, CEO of Questex, he said he couldn't sleep being the CEO of an event company right now. But conversely, being the CEO of a connections company, one that is working to create connections between buyers and sellers in an omni-channel way through a mixture of different sizes and shapes of in-person events and digital connectivity, is one of the best jobs. So there's a real, I think, broadening of what it means to be at the center of your community in a way that has a real blend of different channels. In our hybrid blueprint, we interviewed a lot of people to try to understand what do they mean by hybrid and how best is it to deliver that. And I think it's fair to say that there was quite a lot of healthy skepticism around the idea of hybrid. There's a couple of quotes there on the screen from a couple of the people who took part in this. And overall, I think the consensus is hybrid elements are great if you can do them, but they can also create quite a lot of expense if you're simultaneously running events to appeal to two different audiences. And the consensus seems to be, certainly the people that we speak to, that a hybrid business model is probably more interesting than a simultaneous event. And by that we mean a model which still uses a blend of digital channels, uses a blend of in-person channels, but having the two things running simultaneously and trying to appeal to the two audiences at the same time can be a real challenge, dependent on the nature of your community. But generally, it's that mix of a hybrid business model. And to do that isn't just simply a case of taking what works at in-person events and putting it digital. It's about finding a unique value proposition. So breaking down those 3 C's of events: content, connections, and commerce, and trying to sort of rebuild those in a way which is meaningful for your particular audience, because every community, every industry is different, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. Part of what we did as part of this ebook was break that down, give some examples. What content, connections, and commerce could work in a year-round capacity, pre-event, during the event, post-event. Lots more information on this in the ebook itself. When we were talking about trying to find your value proposition, the advice that kept coming back again and again and again was to really research and get under the skin of what makes your community tick. So on the screen here, we've got the community feedback loop, which is all about publishing content, distributing that content, and listening to what comes back. So the advice being, as soon as possible, as soon as you're able to, get something out. It doesn't have to be a fully realized product, some kind of MVP that helps you to learn and start that feedback cycle. Joe Polizzi, one of the contributors to this, the founder of the Content Marketing Institute, said to put your listening pods on and identify emerging communities. By analyzing the analytics, seeing the response to every single blog post. A successful blog post could become a webinar could become an event, but really leaning in to what your audience wants. And the golden rule when it comes to community building is that you don't own the community. Communities tend to identify themselves. They tend to be quite niche, quite focused. As Mike Seaman, CEO from Raccoon Events, was telling us, there's a full case study with him, and then Karina Bauer, who knows a lot about building communities in the event space. She makes the point that successful communities take on a life of their own, and it's your role to sort of bring that community together, but you don't own it. You can provide the platform, but really it's about the members helping members. In our monetization blueprint, we dived into some best practices for the monetization of events, because when it comes to monetizing digital platforms, it is much more actually about the processes, the people you have around you, the sales process, often, than it is about the technology. So having a flashy technology platform isn't going to sell it for you. So what this ebook is full of is best practice advice on how to do that. And to start with, it comes from really knowing your client base and segmenting them. So in this example, we've got the average decay curve of your top sponsors, your key accounts, your middle tier exhibitors, and then the long tail, which actually carries on right off the page. And interestingly, most of the impact comes from that long tail. They may not be as flashy as your key sponsors, but being able to monetize that long tail, even for small amounts, does end up having a much greater impact, around about 70% revenue impact, than focusing on your key accounts. Once you've segmented your client base, there are broadly 3 different categories of digital solutions. There's branding solutions, advertising, sponsorship type of solutions. There's thought leadership types of solution, content marketing, and lead generation solutions, those that give your clients tangible leads and ROI. And the recommendation is that for each of the packages that you build, it's worth trying to, where possible, to hit on each of those 3 spots in one way or another. And as you do that, you can build these different tiers of packages of inventory. And here's an example here of a sort of a bronze, silver, gold, platinum types of packages. The smart thing to do as the world returns to in-person events, bundling together your digital and your in-person packages together into one easy package that's to sell. There's nothing worse than going to a client with a 40-page media pack with all sorts of complicated different items. The more that you can bundle it together and package it up, the better for everyone. And in terms of what that can mean in terms of revenue impact, this is using our revenue calculator for smart events and 365 communities, and based on an event with about 1,000 exhibitors, an in-person event, we're calculating around about 300k revenue. This is in pounds sterling, by the way, is possible from a smart event. And then if you extend that into a year-round 365 proposition, there's a 300% increase you could get from quite sensibly, conservatively actually, monetizing that client base. And you can see the big thing that changes is on the marketplace side of things. So the marketplace listings is the most scalable part of a 365 proposition, representing about 2/3 of the revenue base. So on marketplaces, we published a really focused ebook around how to create your own marketplace, lots of advice and best practice in there. I won't go through all of these stats right now, but it is a massive opportunity. Marketplaces represent over $1.8 trillion in terms of what's spent. These are pre-pandemic figures, so go up significantly. And it does represent a huge opportunity for event organizers to take a particular niche and to own it. If you already own the relationships with exhibitors, then it's such a missed opportunity not to find ways to monetize that, to give those exhibitors leads year round. And each marketplace in different industries can look different, but they do have some consistent features to them. Broadly speaking, there are two different monetization models, which takes buyers all the way from awareness all the way through to generating leads, connecting people, and order execution. And those two monetization models are the lead generating marketplace, which is the one which is probably the most similar to the conference or exhibition model. And then there's a transactional marketplace, which can be quite a lot more complicated to set up, dependent on what the type of industry is. So transactional marketplaces can work fairly well in B2C in particular, but B2B with longer lead times often, not exclusively, but often the lead generating marketplace approach works better, or quicker at least to stand up. And as like part of the advice on what makes a successful marketplace, 90% of marketplaces which are successful start with a managed supplier list. Now, this is something which in events world we tend not to do. We give exhibitors a few weeks ramp up, if they're lucky, to get their profile ready, upload a few products, and then we leave it. But this is one of the biggest, internal shifts that an organizer would need to make, is how are you really going to manage those suppliers year round? And on screen here, there's a few different ways that you can do that. You can use third-party data sources, there's review systems, there's having really good onboarding assets and how-to guides, setting standards for how people should use it. But ultimately, there's no substitute to having a customer success team who are going to be working with the suppliers to manage their profiles and make sure it's as comprehensive as possible. If you've got a comprehensive marketplace, it can start to provide real value to your buyers. But if it isn't comprehensive, if it isn't managed, you're really going to struggle. So a two-sided marketplace is a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Do you start with the buyers or the suppliers? 90% of the time, start with suppliers and make sure that they are well managed. I'm going to finish with a bit of a focus on data. So this comes from our AI blueprint, and 20 times more data is being generated right now than it used to from each participant. So if your visitors, if your exhibitors are using some sort of an event platform, you're getting 20 times the data than you were when they just registered and walked into a physical event. So the challenge for us as an industry is how can we extract value from that? Because we're creating now so much more data than we were previously. As part of the research around this ebook, we got two particular data points I want to call out. One of them is that data's greatest opportunity, according to the event professionals interviewed, was to provide insights to help them shape their next event or product. And here on the screen, I've got an example of one of our analytics dashboards, which is designed to do that, to help give you the insights into what's happening around your event, what are the micro communities, the transactions happening between buyers and sellers. So how can you break down that overall top line stat and find out what's the real story underneath that? Because when you start to do that, when you start to break it down into different personas, different tribes, that's where you start seeing some really interesting correlations, which could tell you this is something interesting for our next webinar, for our next event. So how can we turn all of that data into insights which can actually help me to shape my next event? That was the biggest opportunity that came out from the research. The biggest pain point was bloody integrations. The integration of legacy systems is incredibly painful. And a lot of the time, organisers they've got each of their event might be on a different technology stack, as is the case from Stuart Ledden from Tarsus was saying that their greatest challenge is a corporate structure with data sets, systems, formats, all in different places. And this is always the greatest challenge. The thing that slows everything down is the integration of different legacy systems, and really you want it just to be simple. You want it to be work with registration, which is seamless, lead retrieval that's seamless. But too often, and it's something that we experience ourselves being a technology provider, the thing that slows everything down is trying to integrate with lots of different systems. So you're not alone if that's a problem that you're facing. We also asked about, with all of this data, what is the most important data point? What's the most important metric that we can pull from it? And the survey told us that around 44% were saying that anything around return on investment, ROI, again, is by far the most important metric. Now, that could also be return on time for visitors, but anything which proves the value of participating is incredibly important. Emerald's Brian Field here told us about how he's seen that the CMOs who invest in their events were becoming dissatisfied because the traditional metrics of running an event weren't enough anymore, and it's so different to what they would get from any other digital marketing platform. So I think this is one of the great challenges for us: is how can we create more tangible and better ROI. One of the things that we're seeing is that when you combine all of the different data points, all of the different touch points that you have between a visitor and an exhibitor, to create an omni-channel view, a single view of all the ROI that an exhibitor is getting, that can, on average, create around 3 times more leads than they were getting if they were just purely relying on traditional lead retrieval methods, scanning badges. So one of the things we do at ExpoPlatform is we combine all these different data points, badge scans, product QR code scans, all of the views, content views, messages, advertising interactions, webinars, white papers, etc., into a single omni-channel lead intelligence dashboard, which creates 3 times the leads for each exhibitor. And this is, one of the ways that you can create, solve that problem. Which so many exhibitors had with the first wave of virtual events, by giving them much more transparent omni-channel ROI. And if I can just finish around this area, which is none of this works, as I think everyone's been discovering, without having full ownership, full control of your data. It's one of the big issues of the last 12 months or so. It wasn't quite clear in the whole technology stack who actually owns the data from running an event. So as part of the study that we ran, 97% of event organisers, so basically all of them, said it was either very important or of greatest importance that event organisers keep sole control of their data. It's kind of table stakes. None of the rest of this is really meaningful unless you take complete control of your data and then start to build the systems and the processes around how you actually make the best use of that. And as part of this, we got various different people added their views in there. Stefan Fossai from EasyFairs made the point that he doesn't want his data collected on a platform which will serve a competitor. Mark Brewster, CEO of Explory, they sort of spearheaded the VCEF initiative around data transparency, makes the point that organisers have to have complete control of their data. I've talked really fast, probably too fast, but I'd love to hear from you and find out if any of this is useful. And I'd recommend, if any of this has been of any value at all, head over to expoplatform.com/ebooks, where you can download all of this. It's 250 pages of content, which I've tried to condense down into a very short a very short talk. Hopefully that's been of interest, and thank you for listening.
Luke, fabulous. 250 pages. You've talked about 25 points. So you've given us 10% of what's in there. By my reckoning, loads of great comments on the platform. Just to, it's always nice to know. I'm sure anybody who's watching today who's delivered a session at a live in-person event or in a digital event, it's always good to know that people are appreciating the session. And Luke, we've had some great comments in the chat within Hubillo during that session, and indeed some questions that have come in.
Sure.
So if you would indulge us just for a few more minutes of your time, let's turn to some questions. And the first one, actually, well, in fact, the first thing I should say is please use the Q&A function to ask the questions specifically. A few people have put questions in the chat. Great. It's good to see people using that chat function and talking amongst each other and conversing during the session. But if you have a specific question for Luke or indeed any of the sessions that are taking place today and you want those directed towards the session speakers, please do use the Q&A specific function in Hubillo and not the chat function. So let's go to some of these questions, Luke. And first of all, from our very own Adam Parry, who said, Luke, do you think we could see an event model which is based on cost per lead? Is the technology and trust there?
Yeah, I suppose you probably could. I mean, I think there's a lot of sunk costs which are involved with it. So I think it would be a brave organizer who would work on that place. I mean, the reason why cost per lead works in well, for the likes of your Facebooks, Twitters, LinkedIn, is because they're operating at such scale and it's such a SaaS product that they can do that. And make massive profit margins off the back of it. I think when it comes to events, there are so many costs involved with building the audience over a 6-month ramp up, venue, technology costs, content, everything else. I think we're not just selling like a line of text. There's so much more involved with it. Not impossible to have cost per lead as part of a pricing model, I think, but I'd always start with charging something for participation, and then maybe you could have some different sort of like accelerator packages with like different lead volumes, perhaps.
Absolutely. No, thanks very much. And thank you, our very own Adam Parry for posting that question. Neil Rowat asked, Luke, great presentation, really insightful. I'd love to know what are your suggestions for event organizers who are stuck between choosing the best way to do events, physical, virtual, or hybrid? How should they adopt technology with their events? It's a pretty open-ended question there, but let's address that first bit there. Suggestions for event organisers who are stuck between choosing the best way to do their events.
Yeah, I think it's so going back. I think to the point around the anything to do with your value proposition has to start with knowing your customer, speaking to your customer. Qualitative and of course quantitative research as well into what it is that they want. So every market, every industry is different, but I'd absolutely start there. I think the point around hybrid events is I think you've got to be pretty sure that it's that sort of like simultaneous broadcast is actually what you need. It might be a sensible way forward might be doing at least initially to do a physical event if that is indeed what your audience wants, and then a virtual event which could appeal to an entirely different geography, but whichever way you're doing it, recording all of that. And hosting it on demand so that people can get access to it wherever it is. I'd probably start with your audience and then do something physical if you can. Maybe a few months later do something virtual. I mean, so one thing that quite a number of our customers are doing right now to try to appeal to both audiences is to open up a platform for like a week or so virtually before the physical event starts, and you can run some content sessions and networking doing that. I would say if you are going to do that, then communication is just so important. We were actually at an event in December last year where we thought we were exhibiting for 3 days, and actually it was only two days. And then the final day was virtual. It wasn't really communicated anywhere. So we were kind of like, had an extra day in Philadelphia just to hang around, which was fine. We went to see the Rocky statue,
Okay.
and it was okay.
No bad thing. And what I would
Yeah.
perhaps add to that question is, if somebody is having to choose, how do I choose which is the best way forward? That ties into one of the points that in one of your slides, a hybrid business model is better than a hybrid event. Perhaps before they sort of start asking, how do I choose? Maybe they should have them. Is that an example where they, as a business, as an organizer, could be set up better internally, where their business model is better geared as a hybrid business model rather than a hybrid event, and having to choose?
Yeah, and actually, I don't think you do. I don't think you actually need to choose necessarily between, I just encourage people just to do something, to get your MVP out, just to start with something, even if all that is initially is just gathering 12 people together on a Zoom call, and then maybe then that builds into something. But you learn so much more from doing it and from talking to customers, and things can start to grow organically that way.
Time for
I'm not
one more
promoting
very,
Zoom.
very quick. Time for one more very quick question, Luke, and I'll push you for a quick response on this one from Joe Floyd. Thanks very much, and good morning to you, Joe, for joining us. Would love to know how the need for owner control competes with building vibrant communities. There seems to be no commons area.
Well, so I don't think actually that they are competitive. I think what I think people are saying is, what the organisers are saying is, if it's going to be a platform which they are inviting their customers to, then they're making the effort to bring their exhibitors, bring their visitors along, then that data, everything that's generated there, the registration data, the behavioural data, all of that information should belong to them, and that's just as registration companies, for example, have always worked as a processor. It shouldn't be that somehow the control goes onto them. Now that's where there are issues with certain platforms that do that. I would say even LinkedIn, for example. So we ourselves run events on LinkedIn quite regularly, because we just find it's a really good way to find people where they are and where they're comfortable. But you don't actually own that data. That's on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn who are building that. So I think use those sort of like more open communities. But I think the end result should always be to try to get the users, the data, everything back to you ultimately, one way or another.
Absolutely. Luke, it's been great to have you at the summit today, and thanks very much for being our first speaker. It's always a bit of a daunting task, I suppose, to kick off the event, but it's been fabulous, and certainly from the questions that we've had in the initial engagement online in that chat function on Habilo, it's been very, very well received. So we thank you very much for your time today, and that brings us to the end of our first session here at Event Tech Live, the Summit. We will wrap things up and see you again very shortly.